I find it very ironic that I'm about to be recommending all of my favorite spooky books to you guys when I'm currently reading the Anxiety and Phobia workbook. Hey guys, it's Nicole. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe. If you want to see more book-related content, I also post about music. I find it very ironic that I'm about to be recommending all of my favorite spooky books to you guys when I'm currently reading the Anxiety and Phobia workbook. Okay, we are working on our issues over here, but it is spooky season. I'm really excited to be talking about some of my favorite books I've ever read, honestly. They're not all like super scary. Actually, I'd only classify like 2 of them as like on the scarier side, but they all do have spookier elements or elements of mystery to them. I really like doing book content and I want to do it more. Let me know if you guys would be interested in stuff like a monthly reading wrap up or things like that. But yeah, today it's the spooky stuff. My first recommendation is a book that I don't have a physical copy of, which is literally an abomination because this is my favorite book of all time. I've talked about it once before, but that is Distant Waves by Suzanne Weyn. I literally picked this book up when I was like 13 or something for the first time because I saw it at the library and the cover just stunned me so much that I had to grab it. It is still my favorite book to this day. So this one is a historical, supernatural kind of romance. It follows a family of 4 sisters and their mother makes a living by working as a medium. So she helps people talk to their deceased relatives and loved ones. They end up traveling from New York to London where they meet these historical figures that we all know. There's W.T. Stead, or Stead, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, the journalist. There's Nikola Tesla, who is an inventor, and John Jacob Astor, an industrialist. They find themselves aboard the Titanic, and Tesla comes into the story because one of his inventions has the power to either save all of them or doom all of them. This book involves time travel, spooky ghosts, and other supernatural ideas, romance, social issues of the time. What more could you want in a book, honestly? It's just a very haunting book. I await the day where something can surpass this one for me. And the next book I would like to recommend is Ruined by Paula Morris. This is maybe my second favorite book of all time. I do have a copy of it, but this is another supernatural kind of novel, and it's set in New Orleans, which is like one of the coolest and spookiest places imaginable. This novel is so atmospheric and perfect for October. We follow our main character Rebecca, who has just moved in with her Aunt Claudia in New Orleans while her dad is traveling. She ends up having to go to a prep school where there are already established cliques going on, so she has a really hard time making friends, and everyone just kind of treats her like garbage, like an outsider because she's new. But then she meets this boy who seems different, yet at the same time she's guarded about it because she feels like he could have this hidden agenda since she has no idea what he was like before she met him. Then she ends up spending a lot of time in this cemetery, and one night she meets this girl in the cemetery. She's very mysterious and her name is Lizette, and this girl is very eager to be Rebecca's friend and show her around the city. This is kind of like Gossip Girl but make it spooky. So many ghostly elements in this book. There is a sequel that I read that is pretty good but not as good as the first one, and that one is called Unbroken by Paula Morris if you're interested in both of them. The next book I'd like to recommend is Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. This is definitely one of the scarier ones for spooky season. It's really intense. It is such a page turner, especially towards the end. This is my personal alternative to Gone Girl because I didn't really like Gone Girl that much. Like, Gone Girl for me was a 4-star when I was definitely expecting like a 5-star, which is what I got out of this one. Also, there's a limited series on HBO, I believe, that is so good. Oh my god. So this one is set in a tiny town in Missouri, which I think is a similar setting to Gone Girl. It's another super atmospheric read. I love when I read a book and I'm just like in the location that it's talking about. We follow the reporter Camille Preaker, who has just finished her stay at a psych hospital in Chicago where she lives, and her boss has sent her on an assignment to her tiny hometown in Missouri to report on the unsolved murder of a teenage girl and the disappearance of another girl. This is a very challenging task for her to return to her hometown. It's honestly a little inconsiderate that her boss like knows how she's faring and still like sends her here anyways, but it takes a lot of convincing to get her to go. She has a lot of trouble reuniting with her neurotic hypochondriac mother and the 13-year-old half-sister who she barely knows. So definitely tense family dynamics. It's weird. This is 100% a thriller. If you want a thriller with a twist, this is your book. Like, I feel like with Gone Girl, everybody kind of knew where it was going, but this, it's so insane. I could not sleep because I had to finish this book. And as I said, the setting is so well established. So good for October. I think I read it in August, which kind of of sucks, but so I really cheated myself out of such a good experience, I think. So the next book I would like to recommend is The Bad Seed by William March. This is a spooky murder mystery classic. The first time I actually heard about it was on Pretty Little Liars, but for some reason I didn't have this in my high school curriculum, so I feel a little cheated. Basically, any child killer you've ever seen in media has pretty much stemmed from this book. There are a string of accidental deaths that all end up tying back to this 8-year-old girl named Rhoda, and her mother starts to get suspicious about the whole thing. This really revolutionized the idea of horror, and not only the idea of women being capable of murder, but like a little girl also being capable of those things. Mind-blowing, so creepy. It also has such a wild ending that's gonna leave you feeling things. There are lots of opinions about how this book ends, and it really kind of explores what happens to the family of someone who is this way. It's like an inner look of the child's sociopath. The next book I want to recommend is Carrie by Stephen King. This is another kind of horror classic. I mean, it's not as old as The Bad Seed, but this is actually the only Stephen King book I've ever read, but I want to read some others now. If you want to recommend some from me, feel free to leave a comment down below. But this was 5 out of 5 stars. If you don't know, this book deals with the main character, Carrie, who is raised by an absolutely batshit mom with strong religious motivations. She doesn't even explain to Carrie, her daughter, about what a period is, and then when she ends up getting one, her mom pretty much tries to shame her and say this is because she's evil inside. Like, this is God's punishment because you've sinned. Like any woman who gets a period, it's because she's impure in some way. It's so screwed up. Like, please take a biology class. And Carrie ends up being teased and tormented at school to such an extent that she ends up using her telekinetic powers to get revenge. Something is fucking wrong with Stephen King, because this like gave me nightmares. This is definitely probably the spookiest one on this recommendations list. Also, he's come under fire recently for writing women in a really weird way, and that does take place in this book. There are some really strange physical descriptions. Like, the characters and their motivations make sense, and I think they're well-written characters, but just like the male gaze, I guess, it's a little weird, but I still would give it 5 stars. I think it's a really well-written story. The next book I would like to recommend is Peril in Paperback by Carlisle. So this book is part of a series, and the rest of the series is pretty good, but this is definitely the best one in the entire series, and they kind of work as standalone, so like you can just read this one on its own. It's a whole series centered around this woman named Brooklyn, who is this book expert who lives in San Francisco, and she restores old books and has a lot of knowledge about things like first editions, like how much is this really old book actually worth, that sort of thing. But each story is its own murder mystery, so she's like this, essentially like a librarian lady solving murders, and I think that's a really interesting dynamic. In this one, which is the 6th book, Brooklyn is invited to the 50th birthday party of a friend, and this woman is a retired founder of a video game company, so she has designed her Lake Tahoe mansion to essentially be just a giant funhouse. She's got pinball machines, giant props, secret passageways, trap doors. Brooklyn is very excited to be attending because this woman has a very extensive collection of pulp fiction that is really rare, and Brooklyn wants to get a look at this. And come the day of the party, one of the activities involves a seance, and then the lights go out, and when they come back on, one of the party guests is dead, poisoned with the cocktail that was meant for the birthday girl, and then party guests start to just drop like flies as this function turns into a house of horrors, and Brooklyn has to spring into action to stop the killer. So this is another super atmospheric read. The entire time I was in the series, I felt like I was in San Francisco, which I would never be able to afford, so it's really nice that I'm able to just kind of like read about the experience, you know? But also this one, just the house that she's in with all the secret passageways, trap doors, things like that. Very immersive experience. I also am such a sucker for this like dead party guest trope. I think it's kind of originally from Agatha Christie, like, and then there were none and that sort of thing. Oh my god, I just eat it up. The next book I would like to recommend is The Woman in the Window by A.J. Finn. This is highly recommended to anyone who likes pretty much anything by Gillian Flynn. It's another thriller. This one follows Anna Fox, who is an agoraphobic woman living in New York. She pretty much just sits at home watching movies and drinking wine and reminiscing about better times in her life, and she also loves to spy on her neighbors. We love that. Super exciting. Then the Russells move in next door. They are a family of a mother, father, and their teenage son, but then Anna sees something hella sus from her window one night and begins to take action about it. This was one of my first experiences with a narrator that was this freaking unreliable. It's done so well. There's a movie that came out that is pretty good, but this is so much better. There's just so much more going on, and the way it really leads you into Anna's perspective and like believing her, and then just, I'm not gonna spoil it, but holy shit, the build up, it's the build up. Like, you think of her as a friend, and like you watch her like in her apartment doing all these things, and you can't help but to trust what she says. You know what I mean? Because like she just seems genuine. I will say, because of that very slow build of getting the reader to trust Anna, the beginning is a little bit slow, but trust me, it is so worth it. Oh my god, once you get to like the halfway point and things start really rolling, so good. And the last recommendation I have is the entire Olivia Kidney series by Ellen Potter. So this is a middle grade trilogy that I revisited earlier this year, but I first read it when I was in like elementary school. I'm someone who actually really enjoys the middle grade novels, especially when they're like huge. These aren't too long though. I like the adventure and spontaneous excitement of it all, like series like Molly Moon or Harry Potter, of course. So this is actually spooky as fuck. We have our main character Olivia, who lives with her dad, and they have to move around a lot because of his job. He works at different apartment complexes and housing situations, so he's constantly getting like new assignments. Well, he keeps getting fired from his jobs because he's not very good at it, but they have to move around a lot. This has very Alice in Wonderland kind of vibes, especially in the third and last book, because there are like haunted subway tunnels, like spooky things happening underground. Despite the series being middle grade, it does not shy away from serious topics like grief, death, murder, ghosts, that sort of thing. I don't want to give away too much about the general series, but if it sounds interesting to you, make sure to go read the synopses on Goodreads. I rated all 3 of them 5 out of 5 stars, and rarely does a trilogy ever do that for me. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if any of these series sounded interesting to you, or if there are any that you've read before. I will see you all next week for another video, and I hope you have an amazing day. Bye guys.